So it really needs to be a partner, not a replacement. It still needs to be reviewed. It still needs to be sanity checked and still needs to undergo that human process.
Welcome to the Optimize podcast, brought to you by VisibleThread. The Optimize podcast is your go-to source for expert insights on BD, capture, proposal management, and government contracting. Each series is hosted by an expert in the field, bringing their unique experience and strategies to every episode. We're excited to have Jeff Shapiro as our host for this series. Jeff is a partner at Cohn Resnick with over 20 years of experience in financial management, federal contract auditing, and compliance. In this series, Jeff and his guests will be diving into the challenges and trends shaping the GovCon space. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on wherever you are listening. Now let's join Jeff on this episode.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Optimize podcast brought to you by VisibleThread. I'm your host, Jeff Shapiro. Folks, we got another fun one for you today. I am thrilled to be joined by Allison Ritz. Say hi to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Let me give you a little bio as I go over your saying hi to everyone. Allison has spent over 12 years working in SaaS, with 5 of those years being spent in regulated industries and compliance. She's the current director of product marketing at VisibleThread and has spent the past 4 years working with both contractors and government agencies to optimize their business acquisition processes. Well, again, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So before we get into the fun that we scheduled to talk about, I think it's important to understand, how did you find VisibleThread and how did you get into wanting to support the government contracting industry?
Yeah, so my history, like you said in my intro, so I have a long history in software, and I've done a little bit, I don't want to say of everything, I would say everything customer facing. So, but a lot of what I was doing was account management, focused on implementation, expansion, product adoption, that kind of stuff. And so I've worked with enterprise level companies for a long time and really looked at kind of what do they need to make their processes work, and where are the gaps and where are the educational opportunities. So I had previously worked in CRM, so at the small business level and then large, and then had a brief stint in tax compliance. I liked the compliance aspect and the aspect of the regulation. I know that sounds very strange to like that, but I thought that the regulation was interesting as it related to the software and the products that they needed to procure. So, and how that was managed. So tax compliance wasn't necessarily for me, but in my search of wanting to try something different, I came onto VisibleThread, and I was very interested in the RFP process and the business acquisition process and how that worked in the public sector. So it was a good transition for me with the background that I had to expand my knowledge. Then I went through the process of becoming APNP certified and really sort of dove into what does that process look like, where are the gaps, where are the pain points, and ultimately what are folks trying to achieve. And I really found that interesting. So I worked in my front end at VisibleThread in account management, and then transitioned into product marketing, product support, implementation, really focusing on understanding how our product can solve those problems so deeply relate to the issues that folks are having, and by understanding the industry and the challenges and all of those things. So it's something that I've found really interesting. I've really enjoyed getting to spend more time with customers, understand and develop relationships, and really help that shape the product and the decisions that we make.
Yeah, we're going to get a lot more into that customer relationship process, but I first want to say there's nothing wrong with nerding out on regulations. As someone who makes their living understanding regulations and interpreting them and auditing companies' compliance with them, it's a fun activity, and there's nothing wrong with it. And oh, by the way, I'm sorry you decided not to go in the direction of becoming a certified public accountant like myself. That's okay. I will not hold that against you. All right.
Not my path, but all the respect in the world for those who are.
All good, all good. We also need people like you to do what you currently do. So, all right, so let's get started with, there's been so many changes in the federal procurement landscape. I think that's an obvious statement these days. And one of the biggest changes is how these large-scale government-wide acquisition contracts have been changing across the board. Many different, maybe not many, but several different executive orders has ordered, consolidation of contracts largely up to the GSA. Mm-hmm. So these large GWACs run by other non-GSA agencies have come into question as to what's their future. And so one of those procurements that you were following closely, the MAPS acquisition at Department of Army, it was the marketplace for the acquisition of professional services. You were following really, really closely, and wow, look what's happened now. So I'd love to hear your path as, when this was born, what started this acquisition in the first place for the Army, and take us through from what started and what you're seeing to the future.
Yeah. So MAPS was meant to be a consolidation of ITES and RS3. So two professional services / IT services, major procurement. So RS3 is $37 billion. ITES was 12.5. So looking at, $50 million roughly ceiling for MAPS. Part of the Army's modernization efforts prior to our, current position with executive orders and mandates in place, they had done some work to try to consolidate some of these things. So eliminate redundancies and try to consolidate things, and I'm trying to think the best way to say that. Trying to So trying to consolidate things in a way that was more effective for both the contractors and for the delivery from a program perspective. Because reasonably, if you look at those two procurements, there was some redundancy and some overlap. So MAPS was meant to consolidate that. Because there were so many incumbents, nearly 400 when you're looking at just primes, but over 1,000 subcontractors when you looked at those two combined. So it's a huge impact, and would be a huge impact for so many of our customers, large and small alike. So we had dozens of our current customers on the list of folks who were incumbents or had some kind of work awarded during MAPS. So that was the reason for me following it, to understand what the changes were and how we could support folks that we were working with now and some of our expansion groups and folks that we're looking to work with in the future. But the really interesting thing is looking at the way that progressed. So looking at the way that it progressed and some of the things that were highlighted as potential changes, there was a really heavy dependency in the original solicitations and the amendments. So from industry days to looking at the sections L&M that were posted. So the types of qualifying performance that were needed, the way that the evaluations were going to take place. And there was quite a bit of back and forth, a lot of questions from industry on that and what that was going to look like over the time of the solicitation developing. In the last maneuver before everything kind of got a pause was going to be an open, additional informational industry day where people could ask live questions. They were going to walk through the solicitation, and there were so many kind of moving pieces happening at the same time. Now, with the changes that have taken place, all of that is paused, and what does the future look like? But ultimately, it was an interesting progression in the first place because it was already on that path. So now we're talking about, government-wide consolidation and moving to a more streamlined procurement process overall. But this was already a consolidation. So we had gone from two massive contracts down to one, streamlined what was, nearly 400 incumbents, that the award was 25 from each category, 20 from each category, so 100 overall. So that was already a huge consolidation. And then now we're looking at what is the next step. So it was a really interesting piece to follow because it was, by all intents and purposes, the largest procurement of the year. It would be the largest one that is kind of awarded as far as number of folks that were impacted, dollars wise, all of that kind of stuff. So obviously very interesting to follow, but with the current changes that we're looking at, it becomes even more interesting because I think it's a bit of a microcosm for some of the changes that are taking place. So ultimately, you're looking at a large procurement that's touching a lot of different agencies. But if we are talking about the changes that we're expecting, so if we're taking the 10 government-wide categories and all of that is going to run through the GSA, there are things, if you look at maps, that some of that would fall into those 10 categories. Some of it would fall into the 9 defense-specific categories. So what does that look like when you have this huge procurement? You have something that we're on the clock to 2027. The current contracts run out for everything that's happening. And, where do we go? What does the next step look like? Because reasonably, you could say it wouldn't move forward as is just because of that split and understanding all the different pieces. But again, with the timeline, it makes it a bit more interesting because there's going to have to determination made fairly quickly in order for folks to move forward and pursue this work in whatever fashion it's presented.
Yeah, there's been a lot of criticism about professional services, particularly consulting. All across the federal government, DoD. It spent a lot of time defending the spend in the spring here, and going forward, I wonder how that was part of the equation as well. But you're going to tell me that, DoD is going to insource all this stuff? I don't think that's going to be the case. I assume you agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. And so I think that is not that question on particularly professional services, but if we're looking at in consulting, if we're looking at the overall picture, the $1 million question is, well, if not this, then what? Because there are so many changes on the horizon. Because I know that, prior to these executive orders, the changes that GSA is implementing and the, OneGov strategy and all of that really kind of focused in on consultancy spend, external spend, really having to justify that in a way that hadn't been the case previously. So something like maps, where you're talking about billions of dollars invested in professional services across the board, what does that look like? So does the size of that the size of the opportunity overall, even if it's fragmented, is that reduced? Are there more things that are going to happen internally? Is this load going to have to be carried by the agencies in a different way? Are some of these part of these government-wide contracts and services that we're getting into overall? I know that right now they're looking at, new agreements with Microsoft, looking at some of our large partnerships with some of these large organizations. Is that going to be a part of that? Or are we going to continue to externally source? So what does this look like for professional services and consultants? Again, that's part of the list of questions that everybody wants to answer.
Absolutely. I mean, I know short term, I think I can see that department and other agencies having challenges getting stuff done just because a lot of people have left, whether it's early retirement or they were riffed, and the technology that is used to, make up for that gap is not quite at the level that they were hoping it to be.
Yeah.
So, going to order off those incumbent contracts, I would think is going to continue to increase. And good to know, they have a little over a year still on the contract, so they continue getting those services. But ultimately, so what's going to happen long term? If you're a company targeting this opportunity, what do you think they should be doing right now?
So I think that the focus at this point, really don't know the next step, because there are several questions that need to be answered. So depending on, okay, to take that a step backwards. So if you look at the 10 government-wide categories, if all of this is going to fall in, there are obviously several things within maps that would fall under those categories. Now, assuming that everything would stay at the same level and we're not cutting back on external consultancies and things like that, because that's a whole nother layer to it. If that's what you're bringing to the table and that's something that is being cut, I think that's another conversation. But just looking at it at face value at what we're working with and the contracts that need to be replaced. So if there's something that's happening that's falling within those 10 government-wide categories, and this could go through a general GSA procurement, what does that look like? How can you strengthen your case beyond what you were delivering in maybe a more niche way? So if this is looking like something that could be more government-wide, which is the push right now, so we want to procure things not at the agency level, but that are beneficial across the, across multiple organizations, how can you reframe to make it beneficial in that way? What type of qualifying performance do you have there? What type of relationships? What type of relationships do you have? What can you leverage and understand about this is how we were delivering, or this was our positioning in this capacity, but if that's being expanded, what does that look like? So I think it's really just understanding the potential of what could be next. So looking at all of the options, and I know that's a broad kind of swath of, does this opportunity exist in fragmented pieces in some version of how it stands? Is this falling to a bunch of different areas and going dead just like several other Army acquisitions have in the last several months? So there are a lot of questions that I probably didn't answer, but I think that if you're looking at things from this is possible, I think best case scenario is how, if this is expanded and if we are going to have to procure through the GSA, through one of the 10 government-wide categories, what does that look like? And how would we approach that versus this Army solicitation?
Yeah. So, I heard you bring up niche categories. Maybe talk a little bit more about that and, how companies can take those niches. And even though, you would just assume that the government is only going to want to deal with these behemoth, large businesses, public companies. I mean, the plain truth is they just can't be as dynamic and, responsive to smaller component needs. Mm-hmm. And so how did those niche companies stand out above, I'll say names, Amazon, Google, Booz Allen, Deloitte, all the big names that you hear about? There's a place for those niche businesses, whether or not you're a small business or you just specialize in something relatively narrow, darn good at it. There's still got to be an opportunity for those kinds of people.
Oh, there absolutely is. The question is it more in a subcontractor role? So even now, you have your Amazons and your Microsoft and your Booz Allens are not delivering all of the services. If Boeing is delivering a plane, there are dozens of subcontractors delivering the pieces to that, because everybody has niches and has things there. It's not a reasonable way to kind of even think about business in any capacity to say that one company makes and supplies everything. So I think that could it possibly be more in a subcontractor role if you're talking about wider contracts with larger companies? Perhaps. But then if you're thinking about, and you brought up a good point earlier from an IT, so we're talking about, IT and services and software and things that are supporting the federal government. It's, well known that as government agencies are far behind the private sector as far as the technology that's available due to all the regulations and due to everything that's in place. So right now, I know along with the EOs and the mandates around procurement, there are similar EOs and mandates around modernization. So modernization and access to software and access to technology internally, using AI effectively, all of those types of things. We've seen that quite a bit in the private sector, but now we're seeing this from the governmental side. And I think the question is how does that look in practice? Because you can say, yes, we want to lean into AI. Yes, we want to use these things effectively, but the the security regulations and limitations haven't changed. So if we are reducing force and we're leaning into technology, how can we do that in an effective way? And are there enough companies out there? Because when you're talking about different security levels. So you have a lot of private sector folks that are offering cloud products, that are perhaps adhered to, federal moderate standards or SOC 2 certifications, and then they have certain certifications when we're talking about, accounting systems and everything else. So all of that, we're adhering to these standards, but if we're talking about actual, it's not good enough. A lot of the cloud solutions, just from a security perspective, are not good enough. So how many solutions exist that offer deployable options that work within these frameworks? How many of those are ready to go now? Because again, along with streamlining procurement, we're talking about favoring commercially available solutions. So getting away from creating bespoke solutions and these extended processes that we've seen in the past. So if we want to say, okay, this exists and we want the government to use it, how do we is the government going to in turn then meet industry to help them overcome some of the regulations and kind of blockers that you traditionally have had with private sector companies getting into business with the government?
Yeah, absolutely. I love, because the landscape is changing and how services are being purchased government-wide, the opportunities are not going away. The work isn't going to disappear. And if that means you got to transition from being a mostly prime contractor to a subcontractor, last I checked, the money's the same color.
It's the same.
In theory, you should still be able to manage the same profit margins and all that kind of good stuff. And yeah, the nature of the agreement's a little bit changed as you transition to a subcontract, but then you still have access to those customers. You still are providing your product. You're still going to get past performance credit, and those rules aren't changing. So you're still expanding your business. You're still making a name for yourself. And so you can, don't think that becoming a subcontractor is a demotion. I think it's just as much of an opportunity, if not more. Now you're on a teaming agreement, you're on a subcontract agreement, with that prime contractor that does have that presence. Maybe they have a presence in agencies that you had troubles getting into, and now all of a sudden you're on their team. They're like, hey, can you go and support what we're doing over at Social Security, over at Veterans, or somewhere else? And all this, and you've never been there before? I think that's cool. That's a great opportunity.
No, I was saying, I think that it's look at it in a positive way. Now, I know that some people would hiss at me for saying that, but I think that there are positives in a lot of situations. Like you said, you could find yourself in rooms that you didn't previously have access to, which is a great situation. But additionally, like you said, the work isn't going away. It's just, how are you going to access that? So I think that it's important to look at, if you are operating in a category that is likely going to fall to one of the 10 government-wide places and is likely to fall what would be at a larger scale procurement, then start to look at reasonably your relationships when you're looking at a subcontractor level. So examining those relationships, what teaming agreements do you have in place now, and how are you positioned to approach business in that way, as opposed to attacking it directly.
I love it. So let's transition a little bit, but along these same lines. So with the new revolutionary fire overhaul, with the new consolidation or procurement, so what does capture look like in the future? How do we chase? Who are we chasing after? How do you see this marketplace going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is really understanding, and it always has been a deep understanding of your product and the value that you're delivering. So understanding what that looks like in the new framework, because that doesn't really change. So what we do, how we do it, and who we benefit is still universally the same thing. So what does that look like in the new kind of alignment? So when we're talking about, like you said, the overhaul of the FAR and the importance of NAICS codes. So understanding if we're looking at government-wide categories, particularly for mids and smalls, that having the proper NAICS code, proper certifications, because there still will be, because legally there must be in so many of these things, set asides, there still will be specific types of businesses for specific types of industries, specific types of companies. So I think it will be more crucial than ever if we're looking at NAICS codes and we're looking at things from a qualifying perspective to make sure that you're maximizing what you're doing there. So I think looking at certifications, looking at different kind of codes or industries or things that you could do to set yourself apart in areas or deliver something that somebody else wouldn't. Because reasonably, if you say that everybody's getting thrown into this huge bucket, that it will become more competitive, of course it will. But looking at how can we differentiate ourselves? So what are the things that we do really well, and how could we position those potentially to a new consumer?
Exactly. So but how do you reach that consumer? How do you get that message out? I mean, maybe it hasn't changed that much. I mean, yeah, quick thoughts on that, or?
Yeah. So, I think that yes and no. I think the little bit of that will be, what do the opportunities look like? So when we start seeing some of these opportunities come out, what do they look like? What is the qualifying performance? What are the table stakes to kind of get in there and compete? I think that will give a more clear picture of what this looks like and how companies need to pivot. But ultimately, yes, so it could be the old way of, we're going to look for things under our code, or we're going to pull specific things from, GovWin or something like that and go on those and go to our regular industry days and our regular partnerships. So business as usual may look a little bit different because, like I said, likely, particularly if you're in specific categories, specific industries, it could be much more competitive, and there will be, fewer awards, fewer set-asides, and broader acquisition. So I think that ultimately time will sort of tell of, is it when this all shakes out and we get down to, what's actually delivered? Because always there are certain mandates and certain things that we want to change. That process starts, and where we end up with all of these things sort of ends up being somewhere in the middle. So what does the end case look like? And how much is the GSA really handling, and how much are we really pushing? I know right now the language is very, in most cases, or we're pursuing government-wide procurements, but there's no hard fast, like everything is going to be X, Y, or Z. So I think that split and seeing, okay, the GSA has now taken all of this, because we're still in that 30, 60, 90 day of plans being put in place and all of those things. And so we're still in the development phase. So I think that once that's developed, once we get a few months down the line and we have a development of, this is what the GSA is going to manage and this is how, you'll have a better idea of how drastically capture may change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're entering fourth quarter spending, and you're going to see everything come out. And so is everything going to be new solicitations, or all of a sudden they're going to find exceptional circumstances to extend contracts, and you'll see what happens. But back to your point about, trying to predict where the next procurement is going to come from, it's just not going to be the same that it used to. Looking at FPDS type data and saying, this agency spent this much on this professional service code, and this contract is coming up for expiration in the next 6, 12, 18 months. Well, there's a good chance that particular contract won't come up to recompete, not because the need has gone away, but because how that need needs to be addressed will now change. And so trying to follow that, invisible ping pong ball, I guess, I don't know what the best analogy in this case, figuring that out, that's going to be a big challenge. So I think to your point, collaborating with your network, collaborating with the team members, even talk to people you actually compete against. I think,
Yeah.
that's often taboo, but right now I think we're all looking for help all across the board to try to figure out how are we going to continue to meet our government's needs, no matter what, spending seems to be cut. Okay, spending may be cut, but the need to keep our warfighters safe, our citizens getting their passports, whatever it may be, it all still has to happen. But you got to find out your solution fits within that new need. May not be, I'm just going to throw a bunch of bodies at it. No, it's going to be now assisted technology paired with some smart humans to fix the process and fix the workflow.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that your point to, tech and people really, and that's in some of these things, the ask. So we want to leverage technology in any way that we can. So looking at tech focused solutions, and that's one of my questions. And I said earlier, looking at what what they say they want versus what can actually happen from a security and an accessibility perspective. So that's the part of it that I'm really interested really interested to see come to fruition, because I think that it would be a really exciting thing if, and it's probably saying naive to folks that have been in the trenches for years and years, but I think if we got to some place where we could balance security of information with advancement in technology and make some of these things more accessible in the governmental capacity, because right now, due to the regulations, that's just not the case. So I think that if we could find a way, and if there was a way, really, if it's so saying, okay, we're going to consolidate procurement and we're going to have a leaner, faster process with more communication and better accessibility, I don't think anybody is against that. But right now, the regulations in place make that very difficult. So are we really going to make substantive change? And so I think that's the thing, that's the $1 million question.
Yeah. So all right, let's talk more about relationships. CRM. You talked about how you've done this in the commercial sector and now you're doing it in the public sector. What's the difference?
Well, you're talking about CRM and managing information in the public sector. It's really like the CRM is there to kind of chase and manage dollars, and in the private sector and in the public sector, it's more managing trust and relationships and understanding the way that you're communicating with people and your message is going across, to managing your relationships more than managing money, because the CRM in the private sector is managing your opportunities.
Yeah. But managing opportunities, there's still the human aspect, right?
Oh yeah.
So it seems so easy to depersonalize the public sector experience. Be like, oh, let's wait for what comes out in SAM.gov and respond to what's written there. But no, there are people who have the needs. It's just like in the private sector when you're going out and shaking hands and making deals on napkins. It's without that last part, the government will never make a deal that's not a real contract, right? So there's still that people part.
Oh, yeah. I think that the interesting thing about, they talk, so much discussion around AI and who it will replace and what the future of our world looks like and the way that goes. But looking at, coming from a background in, account management and customer facing positions and just relational and relationship management positions, looking at procurement. And I think that's the transition for me is that the psychology of it is all the same. So the psychology of sales and acquisition, and kind of no matter where you're at, whether you're in the private sector, whether you're in the public sector, the psychology of the relationships behind what happens are all the same. So the regulations might be different, the hurdles might be different, the hoops that you have to jump through might be different, but the building relationships, the trust, and those pieces of it are still the same. So I think that the real issue or the real misconception of a lot of people is that AI somehow can replace that. And I don't see a situation where that's the case, because particularly folks who work in, DC or work in the kind of public sector trying to get things done or get things started, they understand that relationships and sort of who you know and whose ear you have and all of that is the most important part of the puzzle. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't get the right person to sponsor it and listen to it, it's not going to go anywhere. So I think that ultimately we're getting more and more and more when it comes from AI, when it comes from managing the opportunities that we're identifying and managing, yes, I can put something into a database and I can say this opportunity based on what I'm looking at is an excellent fit for us. We can deliver on it. We can do X, Y, Z. We have this past performance. We have all of those things. So that looking at the numbers and looking at the data, AI is excellent at that. But the relationship piece of it, which is so important, particularly if we're moving into situations where things are more competitive and folks are going to need to expand their reach, that the relationship piece of that is just as important, if not more.
Love it. Love it. Totally agreed. At the end of the day, in order to win work, you need to write a really good proposal. And I hear that VisibleThread is pretty good at helping its clients write really effective proposals. So,
Yes.
Now these days, companies still work in those relationships. You still got to communicate it well and getting your ideas across about why your method, your process, your technology is going to be the superior way of getting to the statement of objectives, to whatever milestone that the government needs to get to. How are you making making proposals more competitive, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that as you move into optimizing and incorporating, so I'm going to start over on that. Okay, so ultimately, compliance, when we talk about creating compliant proposals, so you see folks talk about, make sure everything is compliant, make sure that we are meeting needs. That's really table stakes. That, of course, your proposal has to be compliant. You have to be able to supply what they need, and you have to meet all the regulations and have all the certifications to do it, of course. Yep. But everybody in that pool who meets those qualifications, really it comes down to, when we're thinking about relationships, not necessarily prior standing or having an advantage and whatever, and not going to go into the rabbit hole of what that looks like, but being able to really be customer centric. The biggest mistake that we see folks make when we're talking about analyzing win-loss and that kind of thing, or just having conversations, the biggest mistake that they make is doing a really, really excellent job of putting together a beautiful proposal that talks about what they do well, but they aren't grounding it in why. So we do this, you want this thing, we do it really well, but they're not building a bridge to why this solution is going to solve your problem. So making this customer centric and making sure that we're pulling everything back to the problem statement, and this is what we're going to do, and this is why we will do that better than anyone else. I think that is the huge thing. So it's the story that you tell, but also making sure you're grounding that in information, and simple things like using customer language instead of your internal language, making sure that you are focusing on outcomes. So what are the outcomes that we're going to get on this? Not just this is what we can deliver, but these are the outcomes that you can expect. So all of those things that sound very simple are a little bit more difficult to do in practice when you're talking about putting together a complex proposal particularly, but tying all of that together with being compliant, with making sure that we can do all these things from a regulatory perspective, making sure that the pricing is favorable for us and them, making sure this is something that we want to do, not getting into like, we want to win so bad that we halfway through realize that we didn't want to do this and it wasn't
Or
a great
lose money
thing.
on it. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So all of those pieces together are what makes, to me, the business acquisition process and proposal creation really interesting, that you have to have all the pieces for it to work effectively. But I think that missing out on, so often, of course, compliant, we've priced appropriately, we are hitting all the regulations, and we're explaining what we're doing really well. The biggest piece that's missing a lot of times is really making that customer centric and focusing on outcomes.
I love it. And so now, Allison, what we're often now seeing in solicitations is a question, hey, did you use AI in writing this proposal? Mm-hmm. I've been mystified since I heard that popping up in solicitations, and I kind of just want to respond in the draft RFP process saying, what do you care if AI was using this? Like, that would be my choice. And if you read it and it looks like an idiot wrote the darn thing, of course you're going to throw it out. So how do you avoid? So that being said, AI is a very helpful tool, looking at previous proposals that you have and making sure, you just said the compliance aspects, AI can be very helpful tool as well. But at the end of the day, how do you avoid that AI proposal bias, that, we all fear that the government's going to read it and be like, no person had this original thought or something like that.
Yeah. I think that, of course, with the caveat saying, if you're in a situation where you are, bidding on work for an agency or an organization that absolutely, for whatever reason is forbidding the use of AI, I would, tread very carefully and, don't do it to create content. But I'm with you in the sense of, I think the risk in using AI in some of the things, the risk is on the person submitting the proposal, not the reviewer, because if I'm using AI and I'm not checking, or I'm relying too heavily and it's hallucinating and promising something I can't do, and I didn't catch that in a review, that's on me. That's not necessarily going to impact, the person that's making the purchase. So I would say that I agree with that. But I think that couple things that you can do to improve the output that you get. Number one, AI is not, and particularly if you're talking about generative AI. Earlier, I described a process of, okay, we're going to compare a solicitation against our database, and generally it's going to spit out a score of, we're 80% sure that this is a match for, something that you would want to pursue. Again, it's a good way to weed things out, but it also involves review. So it's not just, we're going to trust this 100% and we're going to take that away. Whether you're qualifying opportunities, whether you're from a compliance perspective and all of those things, really that's the case. That depends on the type of technology you're using. If you're using a more deterministic software where, like I can say, if I look for X, it will tell me X is here every time and I'm sure it's 100% repeatable. If you're using a generative piece and it's giving, percentages and things like that, obviously there's a little bit more checking that needs to be done. But a lot of people are looking at AI in a way to kind of put together proposals, create outlines, and create content. So create the content that's actually in the proposal. Now, content creation using generative AI is a great use case, one of the main use cases, but there are ways that you can help to get to a more reasonable or a more productive output. One of the main things there is to ground in your data. So whether reference files using RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and connecting to SharePoint, connecting to your database of information will allow the LLM to factor in your information when it's generating a response. So if I ask a question about how we can deliver on a certain item and I'm just asking ChatGPT, it's going to give me a very general answer that's not going to be very accurate. But if I tell the system, I want you to reference this set of files that include 10 well-written past proposals for this specific type of for this specific product that I'm looking to deliver. And I want you to use this as reference information to answer this query and to create content. You're going to get a much more grounded and relevant response. So that is the first kind of course of action, I think, particularly when you're talking about folks that are creating proposal content that has to be grounded in data and reality on things that they can actually do or want to do. So I think that's a huge way to overcome some of the challenges that you have. So AI still, you still have hallucinations, you still have things that you're looking at. But if you're grounding it in data and you are really honing in the prompts that you're using, you're really honing in the structural, the structural instructions that you're giving, you can get a much more high quality first draft. But still, even with all of those things, it's still draft content. It still needs to be reviewed. It still needs to be sanity checked and still needs to undergo that human process. AI is not self-aware that this future state of, what self-aware and gray areas and all of these considerations, we're just not there. So the human element and being able to actually apply knowledge and skills and the things that these folks that have been doing this for years and years have gained, it's not there yet. So it really needs to be a partner, not a replacement.
I love it. Oh, hold on, I'm writing that down. Needs to be a partner, not a replacement. So, I mean, that's the thing. You can't ask your AI agent, hey, can you get to the head of the Missile Defense Agency's source selection authority and find out what kind of things he or she likes to read?
Yeah. Well, the scary thing is that if you ask it, it will tell you something, but it's just something. It will give you an answer. It's just going to be complete. Like if you asked me the same question and I made something up.
Right. Oh, I love it. That's so funny. Yeah. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is, the capture managers, the business development folks, they got to get to know these customers. And so that, maybe you can ask the AI, hey, knowing that the end user really likes the use of the following phrases or likes statistics relating to the efficacy of blank, that kind of stuff, that'll then, hey, there you go. But that was the human inputting it into
exactly
the instructions on what to write. Say, hey, take this previous thing, but replace these kinds of phrases with this other phrase. And again, it's a partner, not a replacement. I love that. I'm going to repeat a couple more times before we end today.
Oh, no. Absolutely. And I think that if you think about what you just said, that so many, I think some of the common misconceptions, we're kind of on this wave with AI and a couple of years ago when ChatGPT was brand new, or a few years ago now when ChatGPT is brand new, and not a lot of people have exposure. I think the misconception was, oh, well, I can plug and play. I can just do this and it's going to create it for me and it's going to be perfect and that's going to be great. I think that enough people have exposure now that they know that's not the case. So now the real question is, how much can it do? What can it do effectively? And I think that's really important when you talk about technology mix, or the type of technology that you're applying, and really understanding how to leverage AI effectively requires the human element and understanding, what am I trying to achieve? So in order to use AI effectively, you have to have a really good idea of, if I was going to do this manually and I know exactly what I want it to look like and how I want this to be, which parts of that can AI help with? Can I optimize? And which parts of that can't I? And I think attacking it in that way, saying, okay, so if I were looking at a proposal and I was saying, what parts of this can I easily leverage technology to make more, to make easier. So I could say, all right, identifying requirements, identifying specific clauses and FAR and legal jargon and all of those things, and identifying contractual risk, managing acronyms and managing those kinds of things. Those are things that I can pretty easily leverage this and take out some of that manual process. That's great. I can leverage Gen AI to do some first draft and do some outlining and that kind of thing. That's also great. And so I've done, if I had, a finite amount of time and that was going to take me 10 of my 30 days, I've just cut that out. And I have much more time to focus on making things customer centric, making sure that I'm focusing on the things that are really important for my organization, telling my story. And then you could also leverage AI in the back end. So I've put together my proposal. Now I want to sanity check it. So tell me, what are the themes? Like, what are the overall themes? Am I adhering to my win themes? Do I have gaps? So this is the customer language and solicitation. Where are my gaps? Am I talking about myself in a way that they're not going to recognize? All of those things, when you're looking at quality, are also really helpful on the back end. So it gives you an assistant. I say, from a quality perspective, having an extra set of eyes. It's an extra set of eyes to look at things and say, okay, what did I miss? Because if you're reading through, it's really easy to miss things. So what did I miss? Asking specific questions about themes, about overall pieces, using sort of one-to-ones when we're looking for gaps. All of that is a great assistant and another way to review beyond, team reviews and mock evaluations and all of those things. So I think that there are tons of ways that we can leverage AI effectively. It's just understanding. It's not a plug and play, one size fits all. And there are certain things that are better suited for bringing AI in for a second set of eyes than others. And if we can really focus on those and optimize the time that we're spending. So if I have 30 days, I need to make the most of these 30 days. How can I help myself? And where can I focus my time to maximize the parts that really do require the human brain?
Love it. And I think you've addressed some of this with these recent responses here, but can you give us some insight on what you think business owners and managers need to understand when they're making decisions related to utilizing AI in processes other than proposal development, other back office functions, accounting, obviously I have a couple of things to say on that, HR, security, logistics, you name it. What should they be considering, and what cautionary tales maybe do you have on that?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest cautionary tale is buying software. So you see something, so you're a leader, and regardless of if it's proposals, if it's, engineering, I'm not going to get into engineering software and those type of, it's a whole other animal. But if you're in HR, if you're in accounting, if you're in legal, wherever you stand, that I have seen this product, I have a need generally that I'm aware, or you have so many folks that are like, we need to add tech to our process. We need to optimize our process. So I think, one, don't do it for the sake of doing it, that we're going to add AI or we're going to optimize or add this. It says that I watch a demo and they say that they can do this so easily and I can click all these buttons and everything's great and that's wonderful. So not properly defining your need is the first thing. So what do you need help with? Where are your biggest pain points? If you made a list of 5 things, what is number 1 on that list? And is that reasonably something that AI can assist with? If that thing is, like you said, deep insight into the mind of what somebody's looking for from an agency or what my evaluator wants, that can't be solved by AI. So we're going to move on. So look at our, top 5 things. So this is something. So if I said, working through a contract and identifying risk. So identifying risk and potential language and potential missteps and those kind of things was a big time suck for some of my people if I were a legal and contracts place. So that's something reasonably that you could use AI for. So then take a look. I have a problem statement. So this is my issue. This is what I want to solve for. And this is ultimately, in my best case scenario, what that looks like. Then get an education in the sense of this is what I would like it to do, and this is what it's actually capable of doing. So not, I want, the sun, the moon, and stars, and I want to push a button and have it spit this output and everything is perfect. That's not a reality. So what is the reality? What can it really do? And how can I manage my expectations? So I think that that's the second thing. Understand the problem and understand how it can really help and what part of that can be solved. So going into meeting with vendors and talking through that, if you have those kind of foundational things, you're in a much better place and you're much less likely to kind of get swept up in the whole thing of look at all the things it can do. If you say that's wonderful, but these are the 3 problems I need to solve, and it's not solving those 3 problems for me. So I think being very firm on what you're looking to do, and when you're incorporating AI into a process, saying this is my kind of hierarchy of needs. So these are the things that I'd like to solve first. This is the foundation I'd like to create. And then some of those things that seem like nice to haves might become need to haves once I have that foundation in place. So I think that not throwing the kitchen sink at it. So what happens a lot of times is we don't have our need established. Folks come in and they see something that looks really great, but they don't really know how it would work in practice. They don't really know what they need to make it work, and then kind of come in and it all falls apart. So say you do find something, you have a problem statement, you find a product that is solving those issues. Then the next thing to think about is really, really look at your organization and your team, and how do you implement software? What are the challenges? Do you have folks that are open? Do you have detractors? How have things gone in the past? What issues have you had before with adoption? And then really there is not a situation, and I will put my stake in the ground on this. If you come into a team who is really, really busy and say, we have this new thing, you can use it if you want. They're never going to use it. So it is really important that you make it a part of your process. So from a leadership perspective, you've identified a problem, you've identified an outcome, we've purchased a software, and this is something that we are implementing as a team. This is what that plan looks like. It's also very important to put in place when you're doing training sessions. I say people need to know what they're getting out of this. So when you walk away from this, you should be able to X, Y, Z. So they can easily know that I don't know how to do that, so I have an issue here. There are benchmarks, there are timelines in place there. It's clearly stated, even though this sounds obvious, but it's not always. If I have an issue with this, who do I talk to? Who do I reach out to? What do I do? Because what we learn over time, and some of the biggest kind of horror stories or issues doing surveying with folks, is that it can be as simple as, I was super busy, I couldn't log in, I didn't know who to email, so I went about my day and forgot about it. So understanding how people are going to access it, make sure that they have access to materials. And really, it's our human nature right now of instant gratification, that if we can't find something or solve a problem immediately, we move on. So predicting all of that, saying we have materials for different types of learners, you can access those things on demand, this is who you reach out to with an issue, but then also having standard kind of milestones in place that this is something that we're using, this is something that we're working into a process, and these are the reasons why. These are the reasons why we're doing this, and this is a milestone to when that needs to happen. I think creating that framework and being supportive, understanding people's schedules, understanding what they're dealing with. So I'm not talking about, you work here and I bought this and you're going to use it and you're going to like it, or I'll find somebody else who will. It's not that situation. Right. It's being supportive, creating an environment where they will adopt this, and really I think it's mostly communicating the value effectively. This is why this is going to be beneficial for you. So this long term will be beneficial for you, and this is the reason we're doing that. So all of that to say, understanding what you need and what the problem that you're trying to solve for, understanding reasonably what that looks like. So we're not asking for a silver bullet. Reasonably, what does good look like? What is ideal? What does good look like? What is something that would be better than where we are now? And then understanding your people, your process, your schedules, and then creating an implementation plan around that works into that and that has the chance to succeed, and then executing on that effectively and supporting your people through the process.
I love all that. Great roadmap there. I mean, I think getting buy-in earlier in the process from those who are using it, it's one thing to have the big boss buy-in, or you, if you're the person who's leading the segment, you're the head of HR, great, I need to automate our onboarding process using AI technology. You kind of first want to have that staff meeting where you're like, hey, listen, this is what we're looking into. Wouldn't you guys be so much happier if you didn't have to, scan the W-9, the I-9, and this form and that form? And they'd be like, oh my gosh, yes. And I can go out and spend more time actually recruiting people and talking to our employees, blah, blah, blah. And so like once they go that, they're going to be excited and be like, what can I do to do this? Can I be a tester? I think that's really good advice on, to get that culture change. I think you're looking to is really necessary for making that AI work. I mean, it's just like, it sounds silly, but it's like finally getting that second monitor for your computer, or, it's just, think about it like anything like that. Like, it's the overall work experience, not just the specific, magic potion that makes people disappear. And there's a lot of fear about that for sure. But at the same time, I just want you to be able to do your jobs better and have you critically think more and expand your responsibilities. Most people want to sign up for that. Most. I'm not going to say all, but most want to do that.
You have a good point there that when I say manage expectations, I mean, understand that this is never going to be 100% win, particularly when you're dealing with larger teams and people who are at different levels, that you're always going to have a scale. So you're going to have detractors, you're going to have champions, and then everybody else is going to fall somewhere in the middle. Right. And you can't win them all, and you're not going to. So I think that really making sure people are involved and understand. I've had a couple times that I've had folks from, over my career, that folks from large organizations that make unilateral decisions, and then generally the usage is not great. So you're going to have, if you have buy-in and you have understanding of the reason why, because even like you said, okay, so if I have to scan an I-9 report and I do all this stuff, and this is something that's so annoying and so whatever to me, I'm also very busy. And if I don't know, I have this thing that I can access, but I don't know how to use it, again, I'm not going to use it. And so all the pieces of the puzzle, I think so much of the ownership, and I think vendors sometimes get the bad. Now, to be fair, there are terrible vendors with terrible support and all of that. But I think that vendors that offer support and offer, onboarding processes and all of these, but then are also seeing churn in some situations, do get a bad rap, because if use VisibleThread as an example. If it is deployed and people are super busy and there isn't a firm process in place for them to use it, then it's VisibleThread sucks and nobody likes it, and we're not going to, we're going to cancel it. And so it's not necessarily the case, and not just with VisibleThread, but with other softwares that I've been a part of, that a consistent thing that you'll see is that you'll have meetings and people on a team who have access and say, well, these people have never logged in. We want to have a call with them and talk to them. And you show them and you'll get I didn't even know we had this feedback, or I had no idea what this was feedback. And so it's that whole thing. So understanding, take the easy part away. Do you understand what it is? Do you understand how to access it? Do you know who to ask for help? If everybody can say yes to that, then you can really get down to the nitty gritty of why people aren't using it.
Love it. Love it. So much good stuff here. All right, listen, I think to bring this thing full circle, I mean, how the federal acquisition world is moving and talking all this pace of change, and the people you're talking about, hey, I'm pretty happy doing things the way I've always been doing it, and it's been getting stuff done. That's kind of the same problem that we probably been having before this RFO, the revolutionary power overhaul. So you still got that group of people who've been doing things pretty much the same way and repeating it, and maybe doing it a little bit faster each time, and then trying to get that big urgency for change, not just because they said so, because of a presidential proclamation, but more of a really ingrown desire to, oh crap, I really do need to change and do this different, or else I'm not going to get the 50 other things I need to get off my plate because I'm adopting this new process, or I'm not trying to figure out what technology to implement. So I think that this is all related. I don't think we intentionally would for that, but I just put that all together for us.
No, you're 100% right that it's the same. Again, goes back to human psychology, that it's the same approach dependent in different areas. So the same challenges. That was in college, I had a real interest in ancient philosophy, because there were so many things, if you read from ancient philosophers, so many of the issues and the things that people dealt with, and the struggle of a true philosopher is not to ground yourself in mortal things and the things of the world and all of that, but they're the same issues. So the same issues as far back as we can, record people having relationships and managing the world and managing their lives. They're the same struggles, the same issues, the same things that people are dealing with. They look different, they're manifested differently, but the core parts of it are the same. So you see the same resistance, the same blockers, the same types of challenges, even though they take different faces, show up in different areas. So whether that is, business acquisition through the private sector, working through the federal government, some of the challenges that folks have from the government to contractors, a lot of the underlying relationship issues, a lot of the underlying blockers, certainly some of the issues that we have to resisting change and resisting those things are all come from the same places. So I think that understanding the challenges that you're going to have and not trying to sort of force a square peg in a round hole, but understand that these are the challenges that we have, and looking at that reasonably, and what do we need to do to tackle that? And again, you're never going to win them all, but I think that having a more broad idea of the issues that you may face will give you a better success rate.
Yeah, I love it. Well, so we covered a lot of ground today, from talking about the evolution of the maps acquisition and where it may be going to the future. It's going to be exciting to see, how this category management evolves at GSA. But at the end of the day, work isn't going away. These needs aren't going to go away. It's important for your NAICS codes to be properly represented in SAMP, making sure you're following the opportunities. And if you're a small in a certain NAICS code, you got to represent that. Can't forget about the psychology of relationships. So we talked about that. The federal customer is still a person and not an AI software or a computer. It's still people, and it's the people that have the needs. So do not dismiss the importance of developing relationships. We talked about, with developing proposals. And if you're using AI, remember, it's a partner, not a replacement. So look what to see is that's being churned out by your AI. Are you getting it? Are you using the right sources? Are you checking the outputs? Are you working with your vendor to say, hey, listen, this is the needs I have in order to meet my customer needs. How can you help me? And so again, partnership not only with the software, but the software vendor, they don't know what you need unless you tell them. So it's a two-way street. And an iterative process for you to get to where you want to be, and how you use that technology in order to build and grow your business. Allison, any other takeaways you want to add to that to make sure that people are walking away from today's podcast with some good nuggets here?
No, yeah, I think that a lot of us are in the same boat as far as wanting to see what's next and how things, how things change and how things evolve. I think that we're all in the same place when it comes to like being optimistic, thinking if we do have some level of consolidation and streamline the process and it made the acquisition process easier or more straightforward, I think that everybody would welcome that. So my hope is that where we land with all of this is somewhere there that we have some clarity, but I do hope we have some clarity soon on what that looks like for folks. But ultimately what we're hearing from customers is not, everybody's on this grand pause. They're not. The work's still there. They're still bidding on opportunities. They're still working hard and very busy. So, the work is still there. It may look a little bit different the way that we access it, but it's still there. The need is still there. Supporting these programs, that isn't going to go away. So I think that while things might look a little different 6 months or a year from now, that as many things that are variable, I think there are a lot of potential positives as well. So certainly, as you approach technology, when we're talking about changing, hold on, let me start that. So as folks approach technology and approach optimizing their processes, really just focus on what your needs are, the needs of your people, and understanding what is possible. And I think that will bring you to a place where you're really leveraging AI and leveraging technology in general effectively and helping it to not only improve your outputs, but make your life easier.
Love it. Love it. Allison, I was thrilled to have you here as a guest today. Thank you for joining the Optimized podcast. I think this was really fabulous. Lots of great insight. And folks, please connect with Allison on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Let us know what you think of today's episode. Let us know your thoughts. Let's talk about it. Talk about some further. What are the challenges you having? Finding solicitations and finding where the work is. What kind of challenges are you having with implementing AI, whether it's with proposals or with your accounting or HR or other functions? We want to hear about it. Give us some ideas for future podcast topics. Allison, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me. And yes, of course, everybody can connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to hear feedback. My favorite thing is to hear what you're experiencing on kind of the day to day. So what are you experiencing? What are you seeing? And how can we help? So that would be great if everyone would connect with me. So thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it and enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Until the next time.
And that wraps up this episode of the Optimize podcast. Optimize is brought to you by VisibleThread, the RFP software for analyzing solicitations and contracts, and for creating and editing proposals. VisibleThread is used by 11 of the top 15 US government contractors. For more information, visit VisibleThread.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you are listening. Stay tuned for more insightful discussions on the Optimize podcast.